Hello here and welcome. Sorry if I couldn't really do the thing right earlier. Let's just say I was doing this earlier and I accidentally hit my computer and what happens when hitting a computer? The screen froze, everything froze. I legitimately had to basically kill my battery dead. Make that 100% to zero. So let's start from here. I watched only 14 minutes of this, so 14 minutes of listening, so.
Once centuries ago, Alucard had been close to being at peace. He had started to believe that there was perhaps something worthy in the world, that he had been wrong about God, and that it had been his own pride and weakness that had led to his people's destruction by his enemies, the Turks, and that the only one responsible for his own fate had, in the end, been himself. It had taken defeat by Abraham Van Helsing and the forced servitude under the Helsing organization for more than a century, but Alucard had started to change his ways, to want more than destruction and death. He'd even found humans he could respect and who might be worthy of killing him at long last. He would make his peace, pass on his mantle to Cyrus, and die knowing that the Helsing organization would continue to protect the world under the capable hands of Inigar, one of the only humans he'd ever respected. God indeed kept an eye on Alucard, and even if he hadn't earned redemption, at least he had made peace with his maker. And then all of that had been proven to be a filthy, stinking lie. It was all God's fault. All of it. Or rather, the gods. It had happened when Alucard had at last faced down Alexander Anderson, a human he considered truly worthy of defeating him. Unfortunately, Anderson had fallen short of Abraham Van Helsing himself. Not because he couldn't have defeated Alucard, but because he had been willing to become a monster himself to do it. They had stood there, both nearly defeated and dead. Alucard had felt something approaching joy as his familiars were slain, but Anderson had been near death as well. All he had to do was push past his pain, his fear, and become the pure humanity worthy of slaying Dracula, the Prince of the Night. Well done. Alucard had laughed as he had stood alone, his powers waning at last with Anderson bloody but unbowed before him. Well done, son of Iscariot. You stand before me now as a man, as I should expect of the great Alexander Anderson. Yes, Anderson spat, but you are not the only one with a weapon of mass murder. And he had pulled out Helena's nail, the relic of the true cross, one of the few things that had the ability to end Alucard once and for all. His heart had sung with joy, which had turned to revulsion when, instead of using the weapon against Alucard, Anderson had used it on himself. He had pierced his own heart with that nail, forsaking his humanity. Alucard had roared with rage and heartbreak to see this man, this pinnacle of humanity, turn himself into a monster. Why do this? Alucard had killed Anderson and gone on a short time later to face the rest of the horrors in this world, but his heart had seethed with anger. Why would God allow this? Anderson had been a true believer, a true zealot. He'd become a monster for God, not to spite him as Alucard had. What sort God demanded that? And a short time later, when Alucard had devoured Schrödinger and ended Millennium, he had received his answer. There you are, a voice had said as Alucard's senses returned. About time. Finally, someone capable of helping me shows up. Alucard blinked to find himself looking up at the face of a white-bearded grandfatherly man that glowed with a holy power. His eyes widened in shock. Dead? He was actually dead? That miserable little monster had ended him, Alucard, the son of the dragon, the first and true vampire. Well, it seems your little story has finally wrapped up, God said.
Alright guys, you know what, I made something else during this thing, okay? So if you do see something in the background, sorry, but you're in the video.
Now get up. You have work
Because I'm gonna use, I'm gonna make something with my own.
to do. Work, Alucard had demanded, slowly rising to his feet. Oh yes, God said, nodding and pulling out a scroll from nowhere to study. The damnable Vash the Stampede has put me in charge of the horror division, but there are hardly run things at all. You're one of the few heroes I have. You finally even made your peace with me back there, I believe. I thought that bit with you fighting Anderson was rather poetic, really. The monster of God fighting the monster of the devil. Normally, I would have preferred my champion win, but Anderson didn't have the power I need. What are you talking about? You made Anderson use the nail on himself. Why, he could have slain me. Anderson could have stopped Millennium and me as a man, Alucard demanded angrily. He and Integra and Cirrus could have forged a new world, one where humanity rose above the monsters. Perhaps, but humanity bores me. They're nothing but a bunch of ungrateful parasites. Now come. It's time we finished the onboarding and made you into a proper deity. The others have been slacking off. God told Alcard, turning away and walking off through the endless white landscape dotted with marble pillars and shrouded in ethereal haze. Snarling Alucard and reaching for his guns, he would kill God and wait. Others, Alucard hurried forward, controlling his rage for now. Who are you? Are you really the being that calls itself God? I'm God, the God of horror. The white-bearded man agreed absently. And you are now my newest lieutenant. Alucard, right. Or do you prefer Vlad Teeps? We'll need to get that right on the paperwork. Paperwork. You're going to make me one of God's own lieutenants with paperwork. Don't you know that I kill the men of God and spread fear and panic wherever I go? Alucard demanded, fighting back anger and revulsion. Yes, that's what makes you such an excellent choice for a deity of horror. The white-bearded thing calling itself God replied, still not fully paying attention to Alucard. Here, QB will finish your onboarding and explain things. I'm going to deal with that damnable atheist once and for all. Turning him into a little girl didn't sort out that salaryman. Well, let's see how they like me making someone else my champion. Alucard jerked as God simply vanished. He was there one moment, then another gone. And Alucard was standing in the white mist with a small creature with red eyes and long, strange ears. It was about the size of a cat. It was clearly some sort of monster. Hello, the thing, QB Alucard supposed, spoke directly into his mind using some sort of telepathy. Welcome to the divine division of horror. Through your actions, you have ascended, achieving apotheosis. You're now a god of horror. Congratulations, god of horror, Alucard said flatly. You're telling me I'm God now. That was the most vile, horrible thing he could think of.
Hey, since we're not done, we're gonna continue this thing because I'm still bored as fuck with this story. Because I'm not done with the story because I'm already doing something else. So let's continue this.
His life of utter sin and destruction, and he was rewarded by becoming God. He might have accepted that he'd been able to redeem himself and enter the afterlife as a human as asinine as it would have been. He'd rather just return to Earth and fight alongside Cirrus and Integra again. Maybe then he could find a human worthy of killing him, or perhaps simply exist as humanity's champion, a monster fighting monsters. No, no, not God. You're a god. The boss you just spoke with is the god of horror. We're just his subordinates. Or you will be once you make a contract with me. And if I do not desire to be a deity, Alucard growled, looming over the small creature. It smiled up at him, but its unblinking red eyes were empty and full of nothing but the endless void. Then I eat your soul, and we destroy your world and start over again. We really do need more gods, and you're a reasonably suitable candidate. But if you refuse, we'll just end you and your world as a failed experiment. The thought of a simple cessation of existence galled Alucard, especially one at the hands of this vile creature. And to have his world erased for his own sins, that was even worse. You'd erase all of reality, just like that. No, just yours. A world like that, one designed to produce a proper god capable of helping run the division, takes a lot of energy. Letting it go to waste would be a shameful increase in entropy, but sometimes it can be avoided. I see. And why do you wish to make me into a god? Alucard asked, considering his options. That's easy. To spread horror. You enjoy that, don't you? You made a lot of her happen while you were in your world. It was quite yummy. You see, as gods of horror need terrible things to feed on to live. That's why I make magical girls in my world through their contracts, and by becoming witches, they experience unimaginable horror, a pure, pristine form of energy that our division runs on. Our boss needs that to get power, and it's from him that we get our own abilities. Without horror, our division would cease to exist. Rage beyond anything Alucard had ever felt burned in his soul. So God was real. And he had been wrong. It wasn't that God didn't care. It's God did care, very much so it seemed, Only God didn't care about his followers in the sense that he loved them or sought to make the world a better place. Oh no, God was really just the devil, a worse one than even Alucard. And to God, his worshippers were nothing but food and chattel. But he didn't feed on devotion, praise, or even good deeds. Of course not. It all made too much sense. The reason the world was so cruel, so unjust, so utterly terrifying was because God fed on causing pain and suffering and anguish. But Alucard would not let his anger rule him. He'd gotten past that centuries ago. The Helsing family had seen to that. So he tamped it down and forced himself to continue speaking to QB. After all, Alucard killed monsters, and it seemed heaven was full of them. After that, Alucard signed the contract and became a god. He was tasked with overseeing worlds and causing the maximum amount of horror and pain for their inhabitants in new and creative ways so that the horror division could grow and multiply. He spoke with the being who called himself the god of horror many times and confirmed his belief that he was nothing but a cruel, malevolent, and petty tyrant who sought only to bring woe to his worshippers. Personally, Alucard preferred to think of him being X as the so-called atheist did. This was a poor soul that the god of horror was currently fixated upon. Some fool that would neither bow and worship nor give in and weep in horror and fear. It was the sort of pettiness Alucard supposed he should have expected of God. As for Alucard, he rose through the ranks quickly. He knew quite well how to cause horror and pain, and did so. He felt no pity for these poor humans. Instead, he wished for them to overcome their trials, for Alucard sought a way to end their suffering. You see, Alucard had learned horror was not the only division of heaven. There were others. Worlds that were full of love in the romance division, or those full of laughter in the comedy division, and hundreds of others. At first, Alucard had been bitter and resentful his life had not been lived there. But then he realized something. Those gods were just the same as the ones in her. They lived to cause laughter or love, not because they cared about those in their worlds, but so they could feed on it. Oh, they could have destroyed the horror division. It was actually rather small and out of the way, shunned by the other gods and gods. But they didn't, because they were perfectly content to let a few mortals suffer so their fellow gods could feed, which meant one simple thing. They had to die. All of them. They were not gods. They were monsters. But to kill a monster, you did not send another monster. Alucard might be able to kill the other horror gods, but he would swiftly lose to more powerful deities in other divisions. No, Alucard didn't need a monster. He needed a man, or rather a girl, that atheist. Tana von de Gurchav she was called now. A little girl, trapped in a horrible war, but she kept her focus. She was determined to kill God. And Alucard was in a position to help her. His greatest aid was that the god of horror was lazy, extremely so. He put off more and more of his work on Alucard, who was quickly becoming the most powerful god in horror. He even put Alucard in charge of Tanya's world, to torment her more effectively, and in charge of interdepartmental communications. Effectively, Alucard had become the head of horror in function if not form, which was how Alucard met perhaps the god, or rather goddess, he hated most outside of his own division, Haruhi Suzumiya. She was everything a god should not be: lackadaisical, petty, uncaring, and willing to subject those under her to endless humiliation. Granted, she did not torture them as the horror division did, but her supposed slapstick was painful and humiliating, even killing those she thought of as being deserving of her wrath. She claimed it was to bring laughter, but in its own macabre way, Alucard saw it as just as horrifying as anything in his own division, which was why it was oh so sweet that it was her who sent out a missive asking for a collaboration. You see, Alucard needed a way to destroy the other gods. He couldn't simply start killing off his own division himself, nor could he attack other gods openly. He was stronger than most, but not all, and invariably, if enough deities worked together, he'd be laid low. But the same didn't hold true for mortal beings, or at least non-divine ones. Gods had no power over beings not in their own division. So Alucard needed a way into another division. Enter the Ice Sky Quartet Initiative. Iska was a fad amongst the gods of sending mortals from a world without magic or very little into a fantasy realm. It could have been a way to create powerful champions to defeat the monsters that threatened humanity, but instead it was just a sort of joke the gods played on mortals to feed off their emotions. There were several ice sky worlds under Alucard's control, and he carefully selected a batch to present to Haruhi as choices for her scheme. Her plan was to send all of these beings to high school and have them interact with one another. She planned to turn it into a farce, but Alucard had deeper intentions. He wanted to make sure Tanya went, as she had the most potential to become a mortal free of all shackles, who would stop at nothing to kill the gods and free humanity once and for all. Alongside her, Alucard also submitted two others. The first was a boy named Subaru Natsuki, who was also plagued by the gods. He was weak-willed, but perhaps one day he could find the drive to destroy the gods forever. The other was Naofumi Iwatani, a man who had suffered every indignity and who would be dead set on destroying the gods if he could be properly guided to that conclusion. There were a few others mixed in, and Alucard sent them off to comedy, hoping that Haruhi would be so foolish as to accept his offer. To his shock, not only did she accept, but Alucard had been the only one to respond. Apparently, comedy was considered to be, well, a joke, and working with them as lowering oneself to a base level. But Haruhi was delighted to be working with Alucard, though for all the wrong reasons. This will be great. Haruhi laughed when they met together at a neutral location, a world that seemed to exist just for the purpose of deities across divisions talking with one another. It looked like a great hotel on a small world of boring cityscapes and parks, clean, manicured, and harmless. It was populated only by angels and servants, and had no mortals upon it. What a waste. Somewhere like this would have been a pleasant place for mortals to live out their lives. It made Alucard think of Inigra, but he steeled himself and pressed off. Look, there's just one problem here, though, Haruhi said, looking over the paper with the three chosen worlds of Alucard over. When I found out I was going to work with horror, I thought there would be some cool monsters. But this is all boring. The closest thing to a monster are Rem and Ram, but they just look like cute girls. I mean, that's hot, but where are the real scary stuff? You know, something big and tough and mean. Skeletons and vampires and multi-legged freaks. That's what horror is, right? Well, I hardly thought a group of disturbing beasts would be appropriate for a school setting. Alucard said calmly, flipping through Haruhi's own suggestions. He froze suddenly, and if he had been human still, a drop of cold sweat would have run down his back. What is this? You're including gods in this event. Yahak was a goof. Plus, she'd way overreact if she saw literal monsters. Haruhi cackled. She is not the only one. Who is this Ristark? Alucard demanded coldly, tapping a finger on another world's description. Oh, she's pretty funny too. Totally in love with Seiya. I figure I can trick her into banging him and she can spend a lifetime as a mortal. So don't worry about them, Haruhi said dismissively. Look, either you bring some cool monsters to the table or I'm calling this off. Don't you have something interesting? Absently, Alucard reached into his stack of secondary options and selected one at random. He glanced at it, then slid it over to Haruhi. The Overlord world was a disgusting perversion, one he hoped to cleanse one day. But Aints and his cronies did fit the descriptions of monstrous in both appearance and character. This Aqua and Ristark. Will their memories be wiped? Alucard asked Haruhi, keeping his voice calm and professional. Haruhi looked up from the Overlord paper and shrugged. I mean, if Ristark manages to trip Seiya into bed, yeah. But not Aqua unless you can arrange someone to seduce her. Believe me, I tried. I thought Kazuma would totally go for her and she'd be into him, but instead they're heterosexual life partners or something. He's with Megumin, can you believe it? That stupid Pedonid. Alucard did not give a good goddamn about who was sleeping with whom. But this Aqua could be a problem. He looked at her sheet more carefully. Then he smiled. Hated the undead, did she? Well, that could have some potential. She seemed rash and unintelligent. If she attacked Aints, Alucard would have his pretext for the coming war. It was a problem that she would remember these events, and working with the Hard Division would give her power over its inhabitants. But that would just mean she would need to be eliminated first. And if Ainsur's subordinates survived, they'd likely bear her grudge. Excellent. As a bonus, Tanya already hated gods. Having a fool of a goddess like this around her would be the perfect way to further mold her into the weapon Alucard needed. All right, these guys work, Haruhi declared, slapping down the overlord paper and grinning. So I've already got the high school world created. When can you teleport your people in? I was thinking we'd just send them these big red buttons and trick them into pressing them. That would be hilarious. That's fine. Alucard agreed, hiding a smile. How long do you think this will last? I dunno. Until it's not funny anymore, or until everyone learns a valuable lesson. Hopefully your people can just relax and have some fun. I feel bad they're stuck in the horror division. You guys aren't too hard on them, right? Haruhi asked, sounding almost concerned. Alucard knew it was a lie, a facade. No god cared about humanity, save for him. Oh, I'm sure our heroes will enjoy themselves, Alucard said, smiling politely at Haruhi and avoiding showing his fangs. I know I will. The Ice Sky Quartet experiment only lasted a few months, but that was all Alucard needed. He spent the time well, planning and preparing. He even checked up on Cirrus and Integra. They were doing well, as Alucard had known they would without him, but their world was still vulnerable and hers still ran through it. For now, Alucard would find a way to free those he cared for from the bondage of gods. The only part he regretted is that it would mean he would have to die as well. Ah well, it was for the best. He was, after all, a monster. He just had to make sure that Tanya von de Gurchaf didn't make the same mistake that Anderson had. She would be worthy. She would be his godslayer. And her last victim would be himself. But her first would be the very god that had plagued Alucard for so long. It was almost time for being X to die. And then Alucard's crusade would begin in earnest. Thud, thud. Thud, they are not going to break if you keep banging your head against them. Takayami told Kazuma. Maybe it will break my head then. Kazuma muttered and continued banging his head against their prison door. How could he have been so stupid? Of course, Aqua had screwed up and gotten herself into trouble, but there was no reason for the rest of them to just attack like that. Well, maybe a little bit of a reason. There was that whole everyone's trying to kill us thing they'd just gotten away from. Their prison was far from the damp, dimly lit one in Axel. Instead, it was incredibly well lit, to the point of being nearly blinding. That made sense, as the cops apparently knew all about Dark Shadow. They didn't seem to know much about Kazuma, though, as their prison had a simple digital lock on it. He didn't know if he could pick it, but he frankly didn't see the point in trying right now anyway. I hate this world. Kazuma grumbled, continuing to pound his head against the bars. Why can't I just go somewhere peaceful? Takayami shifted, moving from the corner to come sit with his back resting against the bars by Kazuma, which finally got him to quit banging his head. Dark Shadow was the size of a mouse, hiding in Takayami's pocket and whimpering. It will be all right. We shall explain. You are foreign and did not know the laws well. I'm not foreign, Takayami, remember. I'm the need from Negino. Kazuma sighed, his throbbing head still pressed up against the bars. Well, we're children, so perhaps we shall get off lightly, Takayami suggested. Kazuma gave him a flat look, and Takayami relented. All right, it's pretty bad. First, don't know what my parents will say. I'm not looking forward to the conversation, I confess. But we shall come through this together. What, you're not pissed at me? Kazuma asked. I mean, we're probably going to get kicked out of a fancy school like you for pulling shit like this. Sure, I don't really care, but it has to matter to you. Takayami considered that quietly for a while, then shrugged. I was going to use it to learn to become a hero. I'd like to think you taught me how to do that, Kazuma. That made Kazuma bark out a laugh. Me? Are you serious? Of course. You and Darkness have both shown me what it means to be a true hero. Your willingness to sacrifice yourself for others, your okay, no, Kazuma said, scowling and turning towards Takayami. I do not sacrifice myself for others. Other people can get bent. I don't give a shit about a bunch of NPC. Then why were you so willing to sacrifice yourself to save Hopstad? Takayami countered. I didn't do that for Kaiser Fred and his randos. I did that for Darkness and you and your Raka. You're my friends. You I care about. Everyone else. Whatever, the Lord of the Tomb can zombify them for all I care, Kazuma declared. For a moment, Takayami studied Kazuma's face, then he shook his head. You actually think you believe that, don't you? Damn right I do, Kazuma stated, folding his arms over his chest. He felt a slight pang of guilt that he tried to ignore and continued talking to try to banish it. Look, Takayami, you're young. Yeah, I know, we look like we're the same age and shit. But listen, you can't save everyone, see. You try, you end up dead, your friends end up dead, and then what was the point? You get yours, you make sure the people you love are safe, and to hell with the rest. Because life sucks, and if you try to save everyone, you won't save anyone. We shall see. I think you're more heroic than you think you are, Kazuma. You could have fled with darkness, and the rest of us, you know. Kazuma was about to argue the point when he felt a familiar twinge and his blood suddenly ran cold. Oh shit, shit. Hey, officer, someone, there's a villain coming in. Jesus Christ, let us out, they're going to kill us all. What? Takayami demanded, jumping to his feet. What is it? Very strong undead and a demon. Kazuma gasped, rattling the bars. Yo, someone get your ass over here. They're going to slaughter you all. A policeman stuck his head in, which looked like a cat's, frowning at Kazuma. Calm down, kid. Your parents are going to be here soon. You're in enough trouble already. You dumb son of a bitch, you're all going to die. Kazuma ranted. And so am I. Screw this. Pick lock. Kazuma pointed his finger at the lock, and there was an electronic warble and a click. The cop's eyes went wide, and he reached for his gun, but Kazuma stuck his hand out. Steal. The officer's weapon appeared in Kazuma's grip, and he pointed it at the lights. Snipe the snipe. Snipe. His skill proved to work just as well with a gun as it did with a bow and arrow, and the lights all went out. Get ready, Kazuma said to Takayami. How's Dark Shadow? I'm back, bitches. Dark Shadow roared, erupting out of Takayami's pocket and flexing in the darkness. Let's party. I need backup. The cop was shouting into his radio. The prisoner's there. Shut up and get behind me, Kazuma ordered, shoving the police cab behind him. These guys are strong, understand. Like level a city strong. Where are the girls? The police cat blinked, his eyes glowing in the dim light. What are you serious? Look, take your damn gun and get ready. Kazuma snarled, pushing the weapon at the officer. If things go south, run like hell. Find Izuku Midoriya, Katsuki Bakugo, and Iris Stylish Sword Belzerd. They might be able to handle the hell that's about to break loose here, because I'm pretty damn sure the Lord of the Tomb just found us. I'm not just going to abandon my post. You're my prisoners, Takayami cut the officer off. It is best to listen to him. This could mean the destruction of Japan if we do not act quickly. Get a hold of All Might, or possibly Endeavor. They might be able to hold the line. The officer was silent for a moment, then pointed. Your friends are down the hall that way. Here's the key card. He picked up his radio, spoke into it. All units. Be advised we have an Omega-level villain threat at Mufus Precinct #303. Repeat, this is an Omega-level villain threat. Alert the pro heroes. What are you? Police, we've got a prisoner breakout and worse going on here. Kazuma dashed down the hall, only to bump into darkness with her sword drawn. Behind her, a frightened, yeah, how'd you get out? Kazuma asked, facing the door that led to where he was sensing the threat and conjuring up Chunchmaru. The bars are not so tough when Aqua blesses me, Darkness said grimly. I shall go first. Be ready. Right behind Takuya for Belzerg and Queen Iris. Darkness roared and charged not the door, but the wall itself. She barreled. Sacred exorcism. Aqua bellowed, pointing her hands through the gap. There was the sound of the clang of metal and bellows from Dark Shadow, then a series of explosions that ripped apart the room. Kazuma dashed through as the temperature suddenly dropped like a rock, the surfaces of the station suddenly rhyming with frost. Giant spikes of ice flew through the air, to impaling Dark Shadow. Ha! You are strong, but you cannot defeat moi. I confess, your skill astounds me, O perverted crusader. Did someone teach you how to handle that lump of metal you call a sword? That was when the far wall exploded and evolved. Fear, wait, Kaz, time for a wonder, everyone. scattered paper. Darkness had a lump of earth pinned down with her wizard her foot on Takayami's throat, a conjured spear of ice inches from his beak, while the teacher, for his part, had frozen with a fist that was nearly, and that was when Aqua popped up, pointed a hand at Wiz, and said, "It turn you, Kaz." I said, "Time out, but Kazuma, they're evil now." Aqua, "They were running Axel for the Lord of the Tomb." "Wait, is that true?" Kazuma demanded, turning his head to Vanir, who had just finished reforming. "It is true, moi and our dear Wiz were indeed the rulers of Axel in the name of the tomb. Oh, imprisoned young men who should learn the local customs better, but that is not the entire story. We were trying to save peoples," Wiz said, tears forming on her cheeks, then immediately freezing in the chill air. "We helped Eris lead a rebellion. We succeeded too. We were driving the tomb's forces from this world, but then the damn smug, smiling director Koizumi showed." Okay, Kazuma." He turned to the, "Look, sorry, false alarm," that Aqua wailed. "I don't want to be in debt again. They can't take all my stuff. I just got it. I already have to." "Oh, just shut up already." Kazuma, "Come on, that may be a problem." Darkness, sort of. "Great, more debt." "Come on." Kazuma, "Seriously, that was a, you know, yeah, they are mostly harmless, even if they were generals in the Devil King's army." Megumin said, "Wiz is a shopkeeper. If you can call her that, she's got worse business sense than a man selling sand in the desert." Because it was, "What the hell are they even doing here?" "Kazuma, Aqua Wiz, that's my name," he said. "First, I have to pee. Cause are you, I know, but I'm not really used to having to go to the bathroom." And Aqua trailed off. "Find Megumin, show her how to," Kazuma said. He pointed, "Pick lock." Megumin took Aqua outside, where the puzzled look. The police watched the two girls go, then turned to Kazuma. "You know, most people don't have a prison." "Yeah, sorry, it's her first day being human," Kazuma said awkwardly, rubbing the back of his head. Then he froze. "Shit, forget I said. Nervous bladder. Right, I'm just gonna go talk to All Might and the police." "Wait, guardians." "Oh, hell no. I am not going to be the ward of that smirking jerk-ass demon," Kazuma shouted. "You come right back here, mister. I demand to be emancipated right now. My parents are going to kill me." Uraraka groaned. "I managed to get expelled from school on my first." "You did not have to aid us, Uraraka. We could say you dark." "No, it's fine. I'd rather stick by my friends even when they're idiots than turn my back on you. Considering how many times you all saved my life, it's only fair," Uraraka said. "I just wish I had some of that gold from the Baroness or Kaiser. Maybe that would help a little. Instead, all I have is my sword back homes that can't be worth too much." Megumin and Aqua came back, Aqua looking, being a, "Did you at least wash your hand?" Kazuma demanded as he picked the lock. "I am a goddess of..." Aqua's face fell, and she started. Megumin pulled her into a, she washed her hands. "I'm not looking forward to the first time she has to go poop. Forget that, we're going to have to explain periods to her, aren't we?" Uraraka, Kazuma, la 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 la. "Oh, you're going to get to hear all about it now. Megumin, we're dating. Just you wait. You'll have to deal with it same as I do. Now, I think it's only fair, since you All Might coughed politely. Uraraka let out a squeak and suddenly stood at attention. Even dark shadows stopped squeezing. Darkness melted. "What, you here to expel us?" Kazuma, "SHH. It's my plan." Aqua, "Trust me, you know we could have just gotten away at any time, right, Aqua?" Megumin asked. Oh, Aqua turned. "Never mind. Pretend you didn't hear that. So, what's up?" Aqua, "That's All Might. Didn't Midoriya tell you about him? He's the #1 pro." "Oh, wow." All Might slowly, "You really are for..." Uraraka closed her eyes. "Midoriya told you, didn't he? I should have known when I saw him sneak off with you." Yes," Aqua said quickly. She leaned up close to the bar. "Don't, I know. All my..." "Midoriya has informed. He told you she was a useless idiot then?" Kazuma asked, jerking his thumb at Aqua. "I mean, she did used to be a goddess and all, but she's really dumb." Kazuma, Aqua snarled, elbowing Kazuma in the gut. "Stop ruining my..." "I think it's best if we don't have this conversation while you're all pretending to be in jail," All Might said. "Come, sure, why not? That way I can deck Vanir in his smug prick face." Kazuma, Why don't we hold off on the violence until after we establish what's going on here? All Might said. I should have rounded you all up and had this conversation before you left school. Letting you loose in the world was an accident waiting to happen. In later years, All Might would come to marvel at just how apropos his turn of phrase had been, though not for the reasons he'd intended. Once you eliminate the impossible, whatever is left, no matter how improbable, must be the truth. Principal Nezu, you'd think that sitting in a room with some of the most powerful people in the nation of Japan would have impressed Kazuma and his friends. That is, if you didn't know them very well. Kazuma figured at this point he had hobnobbed with royalty for long enough that it just didn't bother him anymore, and he'd never been all that reverend of station in the first place. As for Megumin and Takoyami, they were so wrapped up in their own eccentricities they viewed social standing as more of a competition that could be won through force of will. Darkness and Uraka at least attempted to behave in a respectful manner, but as a noble Darkness obviously considered herself the equal of anyone who wasn't Iris, while Uraka tended to treat everyone with the same level, and Aqua, well, she had, and was a few French fries short of a happy. So not only did she figure she outranked everyone, she probably didn't understand. So just to be clear, because the chief of police, who was apparently a dog or something, blinked. You are more concerned about debt than the fact that there's an interdimensional warlord out to conquer the world. Woof. They'd spent a great deal of time going over everything that could be dredged up about the Lord of the Tomb and his minions. It had been quite boring and lasted for hours, and by this point Kazuma was rather done with the whole affair. Mikazuma gave a theatrical shrug. I deal with that sort of thing all the time. It's a pain, sure, but the worst that can happen is you die again. That man, it doesn't matter how many times you die. It's always there, waiting. And I just hate being poverty-stricken. Plus, if you're poor, you have to worry about finding enough to eat. Kazuma can make rations, but they get boring after a while. And they're not very good for my MP. Yeah, and if you have money, you can buy weapons and armor to fight the bad guys with. Uraka added. Proper funding is very important to an adventurer, hero's career. I learned that when we had to find the money to get enough sulfur and saltpeter to make gunpowder, not to mention all the bronze, Takoyami pointed out. That was very expensive. Indeed, to properly marshal forces to fight off the Lord of the Tomb is a considerable undertaking. Darkness agreed. If we are in debt, we shall not be able to properly mount a defense. And now that I have to eat, I'm going to need a lot more of those. That caused all the men in the room to look varying levels of aqua. Those are, for girl things, Uraka hissed. Not, well, I suppose we can add basic sanitation lessons to the list of things we're going to need to go over, Nezu said brightly. He, along with the chief of police, some government bureaucrat types, All Might, and a couple of. So, really, Megumin let out are you done yet? At least in jail you get to go to sleep. Being reincarnated in a new world is very tiring. Vanir and I can answer your question. Was pipped up. She'd remained relatively quiet aside from assuring everyone that she was not that kind of lick. We don't need sleep. It's one of the things I miss. I just wish that there had been enough. What? Aqua asked, frowning. She promised to finally exercise you like the unnatural abomination that OW. Kazuma gave Uraraka an approving nod for having kicked Aqua under the desk. She was proving to be an excellent addition to their group. He could use a little more sanity in his life. We really want to know is just what the heck are you gonna do with us? Kazuma demanded. I mean, now that you know we're time-traveling aliens or something. Obviously, Uraraka and Takoyami live here, so you should let them go at least. Their parents have been notified of their presence here. Nezu promised. As for what to do with you, well, we already know how to be heroes, for we are the Megumin. It's school or prison and debt, he hissed in her ear. What would you prefer? Because I'm pretty sure prison has a strict no. We would be honored to attend this instant. Dark, she'd had on her responsible. Where had they been when they were? I think a bit of community service might be in order as well, the chief of police added. You did, after all, destroy a restaurant and a police station. That sounds very reasonable, Uraka said before anyone else could offer their opinion. Yes, we are grateful for your mercy, Takoyami agreed. You will also be attending, shall we say, remedial classes, as put in, to accommodate you to our local customs and laws. We understand Aqua's display wasn't an intentional violation of the law, but in future such things will have to be dealt with more harshly. What about those two? Kazuma demanded, jerking his thumb at Euro. What went down wasn't their fault. Be that as it may, for now I think we're going to require their presence, if for no other reason than we can study these new abilities they seem to have gained. Would you like to see more of my act? I know tons of them. She'd been delighted to show off her impressive array of party tricks to a captivated audience, though after a half dozen they'd moved on despite Aqua's willingness to perform more, perhaps not in public. Remember, quirk usage is illegal, Aqua, All Might said gently as they all stood and headed for the door. Uraraka and Takayami ended up getting taken home in government vehicles, where they would apparently. Kazuma was sort of grateful he didn't have to worry about that, but it got him thinking about his own parents. They'd have been dead for hundreds of years now if they'd ever existed in this wacky timeline. Megumin seemed to notice something was bothering Kazuma and took his hand as they walked the few short blocks to their apartment. Aqua talked animatedly to All Might about a variety of inane subjects, while Darkness seemed morose now that Takayami was gone. Apparently, she would miss her late-night entertainment. Well, thank you for enlightening me on how there's a police officer on duty to watch over you. Apparently, this is where all the students from another world are staying. That will merit further. Yes, sure, 'cause guess we'll see you. Farewell. The former goddess turned from going. Yeah, thank you. You still have one believer in this world. That got Aqua to cry, and she rushed down the stairs and wrapped the startled hero in a hug. Thank God. Come on, let Kazuma. You look worn out. I just maybe I can still be a goddess, you know. Aqua sniffed, wiping at her eyes. If that's how things work here. I don't think we're in the comedy realm anymore. I don't really know anything about the other divisions, but they do have different rules. All farewell. With that, he leapt off into the sky, vanishing into the darkness of night. Kazuma helped Aqua up the stairs, then passed her over to Darkness, who took Aqua to her room. There were 4 bedrooms in the apartment, though the one that was supposed to be Megumin's was currently unoccupied, as the first thing she'd done upon arriving was to move her stuff into his room, apparently having decided they'd been dating long enough to get that serious. Not that Kazuma was complaining. After the long day, Kazuma and Megumin both settled down into a hot bath, relaxing in each other's arms. The apartment was surprisingly luxurious, the sort of thing Kazuma would have called an expensive condo back in his version of Japan. It had 2 bathrooms, one with just a shower, and the other with that and a large bathtub. Kazuma was ready to fall asleep, but Megumin cozied up to him, frowning slightly. What's up? Something is bothering you, Megumin said, tracing lazy lines on Kazuma's chest. It tickled slightly, but also reminded him he'd lost a lot of chest hair. Apparently, he really had been de-aged back to a year 1 high school student. Kazuma shifted, then sighed. Probably the same thing that's been bothering you since you talked to Union this morning. Oh, I thought you hadn't noticed. Megumin mumbled, sniffing slightly. We've been friends for too long for me not to be able to tell when something's bothering you. You did a pretty good job of hiding it, but I saw you when Iris talked about Konko. Megumin pressed her face against Kazuma's chest, and he held her while she cried. He did a little crying himself. He'd missed the little bugger. Not that she'd been little, but still, he understood. You were thinking of your parents, too. Megumin asked after they'd both dunked their heads under water and scrubbed their faces. Yeah, I'm not real sure what year it is in relation to the ones I know. Midoriya said they reckon years now from QE, the Quirk era. Doesn't matter. This isn't my world, I'm pretty sure. Besides, that had been Belzerg for a long time. But you're here now. So are Darkness and Aqua and Takayami and Uraraka and Midoriya and Hatsune. Heck, even Iris, Union, Eris, Wiz, and that smug prick. So I guess this is home now. Megumin was quiet for a long time, and Kazuma closed his eyes, letting the water soak in. After a bit they got out, and when they were drying each other off, Megumin asked, Do you want to go back? Kazuma asked, pausing and frowning. With Iris. Do you want to go back to Belzerg? Megumin clarified. Kazuma hesitated. He knew the answer he wanted to give, but he had to be sure. Do you? I don't know. Megumin admitted. This world is strange, and I don't think they will let me use my explosion magic very often. But I don't know. If you are here and the others, I could learn to live without my daily explosions. Then we should stay, Kazuma said, putting his hands on Megumin's shoulders and drawing her close. Together, it's peaceful here. Maybe the Lord of the Tomb never shows up. You and me, we do the hero thing for a few years, or I figure out some sort of other way to get rich. Then I dunno. We become needs for the rest of our lives. Together, Megumin managed to smile. Okay. Then she took Kazuma's hand and led him to bed. Then it really did feel like home. After all, as long as Kazuma had his friends, the next morning, Kazuma was awoken by a pussy sitting on his face. It was, unfortunately, the wrong kind of pussy for him to get excited about. So instead, he spat out some fur and picked Chamusuke up and lifted the dozing feline onto the bed. The cat yawned and stretched, her little wings fluttering slightly, and Kazuma frowned at the cat. So what, are you still a dark god? Ever going to turn into the cat girl? Kazuma demanded. In response, Chamas farted out a bit of fire, singing Kazuma's fingers, then rolled over and went back to sleep. Swearing under his breath, Kazuma attempted to roll over and go back to sleep, only for there to be a sudden banging. Dark. Fine, we hear you, Kazuma called as Megumin groaned and put a pillow over her head. He poked her with a sigh. Come on, might as well. At the very least, I need to figure out what's up with Iris and Bakugo. Still gotta break those two up. It was a bit weird and awkward getting dressed in front of Megumin. Though they'd lived together for hundreds of years in the divine realm, it had a decidedly different Aqua was munching away on a bowl of cereal out in the living room while watching some cartoon show with, of all things, All Might as the main character. Darkness fried up a few eggs while Kazuma showed Megumin how to use the rice cooker, which, was pretty easy. Rice, water, press the button. Done. With Darkness herring, they all managed to get dressed and out the door relatively early. Hey, good morning, neighbor. It's a great day, is a cheery voice called as Kazuma and company exited the door. He turned to find an ordinary-looking boy in a UA uniform with a group of 4 girls, 2 of which were obviously twins, and another of which was an elf, Kazuma said, taking a step back from the silver-haired girl. She went scarlet as the boy glared, but Kazuma corrected himself. No, wait, half-elf. What the heck? Kazuma, you do recall what All Might said, don't you? Darkness whispered in his ear, pulling him away from the other group. This is the building where the people from another world are staying. Oh, right. He's Sato Kazuma from Belzer, which goddess shanghaied you people into this. That made the boy and the other girls relax slightly, which was good because the blue-haired twin had pulled out a giant ball and chain from nowhere. I'm Natsuki Subaru. I guess I'm originally from Japan, but I've been living in Lugnica for a while. And we got pulled into this by director Nagano. They shook hands, and Kazuma had the oddest sensation of deja vu. Have we met before? I don't think so, Subaru said, frowning. Oh, sorry. This is Lady Amelia. I'm her knight. The twins are Rem and Ram, our close companions, and this is our friend Felt. Oh, so she gets a lady, but I don't. Felt demanded, but then smiled and winked. How'd you do? Glad we're not the only ones those jerk gods dragged into this place. The short one with a hair-triggered temper is Megumin, the tall pervert is Darkness, and the dummy over there is Aqua, Kazuma said, which made Subaru laugh and his companions blush. Barasu, I think this one is nearly as dumb and rude as you are. Ram remarked. She was nearly identical to her sister, save that her hair was pink instead of blue and hung over her left eye. Well, and she didn't have a giant-ass weapon in her hands. Kazuma, that is not a proper introduction. If we are going to be dating, you're going to have to learn to respect my culture, Megumin informed him, poking Kazuma in the side. He sighed heavily and stood up on one leg, waving his hands about. Behold, I'm Kazuma, master of 1,000,000,000 skills and slayer of the Devil King, yada yada yada. Better. Subaru and his friends stared at Kazuma in bafflement, but the latter hid a smile. Megumin looks HMP. Later, Kazuma called. See, I knew Mina would talk. Felt growled. Oh, he's gonna get it. Is not Mina the pervert that Uraraka warned us of? Dark. Why, I thought you had a boyfriend. Kazuma quipped, then laughed when darkness flushed. His humor ended when he saw who was waiting on the sidewalk, leaning on his axe. You, oh great, you live here too, Bakugo said, scowling at Kazuma. It was sort of hard to tell if that meant he was irritated. Maybe what's it to you? Cause I'm waiting for Iris. Why? Kazuma snapped. I could blow him up. Megumin offered, giving Bakugo. Show him who the real Bakugo. Wait, were you Konko's sister? She was always on about her crazy-ass explosion sister. Thought you'd be. That made Megumin's eyes go very wide, and she clutched. She is Konko's sister, you jerk. Kazuma, I owe her. She saved my ass a few times. Bakugo worked his jaw for a moment. You need something, frag, you tell me. I'll help. Your sister, I was there when she died. Hell of a blast. Best I've ever seen. She was, well, the best damn wizard I've known. I always knew, Megumin whispered. A part of Kazuma's anger at Bakugo, or rather his general frustration at his current lot in life, softened slightly. Why don't we wait with Bakugo? He said quietly. I'd like to. I ain't much of one. Union had to work hard to hold back tears as she took her place in the judgment seat. Why did Megumin have to be so mean after all these years? They were good friends and rivals in all things. Union knew that, but she still felt like an outsider with Megumin's friends. True, Kazuma, Darkness, Aqua, and even Eris were kind to her, and they did have fun, but they were still Megumin's friends, not Union's friends. I just wish I had a good friend. Union sighed. She looked hopefully at the empty chair before her. Maybe this Katsuki Bakugo will be a good person, someone I can.
Okay, let's see. I know what the fuck this is. We're basically in the. I can't really finish what the fuck everything is.
The hell is
On to this part one, okay? So if you like, please like, favorite, share, something new. Goodbye. This is me part one. Fuck's sake, because I'm all.